Hello, welcome to Njevity's class on hidden gems in distribution. My name is Estelle Varner. I see that we're not quite all here, but this is a pretty jam-packed class, so I'm just going to get started and let people join as they come in. Just a little clarification here to be sure that you understand. This class is not going to be a deep dive into a particular process. What we are focusing on here are some features within the distribution module that are typically underutilized, and just to get you aware of them and hopefully show you enough about them to get you curious and decide, well, oh, that would apply and would be useful for our company, or no, that's okay that I continue to ignore it, but at least to be aware of those features and functionalities in the distribution module. I will start with features in the purchase order module, move to inventory, sales order processing. And if it feels like I jump around a little bit, that's because we're not going from one flow process to the next. We're showing unique features that are kind of all over the place in these modules. So let me jump right in. As you may be aware, in later versions of GP, we now, in purchase order processing, you see I'm in the purchasing menus choices for Great Plains. I have GP 2018 on my installation, so if it looks slightly different than yours, that might be a version difference. But in later few versions, we have purchase requisitions added. It used to be purchase order entry was our top menu choice, and now we have purchase requisitions. And that might be a feature that could be useful to you. I've already got a requisition set up so that I can show you a little bit about it. You know that typically when you put in a purchase order, you have to have or know all of the information immediately. You need to know what site it's going to. You need to know who you're purchasing the items from, and dollar amounts and all of that. Whereas there may be times where you would like to request that you can purchase these items but not have all of that information at the onset. And that's where a requisition may come in handy. So notice when you open the screen, it opens up where the first item listed, you see a lot of the detail, and typically these detail screen in other screens are hidden. So like if I use my high details button, you see now it looks a little more like a normal GP screen. But in the requisition, by default, it opens up to the details so that you can, as you're entering your items that you are requesting that you can order, you put in your item number, your unit of measure, your quantity that you want, cost, and there are fields. It'll automatically fill in as you do the item number. It'll fill in the description. And there's fields for the site and the vendor ID. Now, in this particular requisition, I filled that in because I'm in a situation where for this order that I know that it's going to go to my warehouse and who the vendor is. There may be times at this particular point that you don't know this information. And I have another requisition that I have set up where you can see that I have not filled that in, and yet I was able to save it. And you know, on a purchase order, you can't save that. Now, it does put an asterisk in those fields to indicate that you're not going to be able to purchase it without this information, but we can save the requisition, we can submit it, and then go back and fill in that information later. The purchase requisition works best if you're also using Dynamics GP workflow, but it can be used without it. You have access to smart list reports and navigation list reports that show the status of requisitions. Notice this one has just been saved. I have not submitted it, whereas the previous one I had already submitted the requisition for approval. Now I can track that, but without workflow, I can track that in smart list reports and see where I'm at on it. When I am ready, when I do have all the information like this, and I've submitted it, and assuming it's been approved, I can transfer this requisition to a purchase order quite easily. You see we have actions here. I can click on purchase, and let's have the purchase order preview window come up, and it's taking a bit. Here we go. It's going through and taking a look at my whole order. Now, if there had been anything wrong, say I had been missing a site or vendor or anything, I would have a big red X on any of these indicating there's more information that I need to fill in. And I could come over to these tabs and put in that vendor information. I could click on the items at this point and change the unit cost if I feel like it needs to be done before actually generating the purchase order. And then, but with everything good and no red X's, I'm going to go ahead and click on generate so that you can just see the process and the end result over in the purchase order screen. And let's you take a quick look at this report that it generates. Okay. Computer seems to be running a little slow today. I had noticed it earlier. There we go. Sorry about that. All right, so it actually has generated a purchase order. So we get our generation register that tells us what I have transferred over to a purchase order. I'll close that report and let me go back to my purchasing menu items so that you can see that purchase order entry. And it should be my last purchase order. So let me pull that up. 2082. And I wanted to show you this and actually generate it instead of just talk about it, because I wanted you to see that when it does generate from a requisition, we have these little links that show up on our line items. And that is just indicating that these line items came from either sales order processing or purchase order processing, because it was generated through a link process. So if I drill back on this particular item and click on the link icon, I can actually see what requisition this came from. And then you can pursue or follow this purchase order through its normal activity in the purchase order module. But in this case, I didn't start with the PO, I started with the requisition. All right, so now talking about generating purchase orders. In this case, I generated purchase orders from a requisition, but have you ever had a time where you wished GP might suggest what needs to be ordered, that you didn't have to go through the work and figure out what your balances are, what you need to order, and then make those purchase orders? And there is actually a tool that incorporates some functionality in the purchase order module as well as the inventory module, and that's called the purchase order generator. And I want to show you a little bit, there's obviously some setup that has to be, or setup choices that need to be made, and the purchase order processing setup screen. And then on the inventory items, see, I have a item set up here, and I've chosen this fax machine to demo for you. Notice that they have a -20 on hand. And one of the things, there's a couple screens in the item that you have to do to be able to have the purchase order generate for you, or for GP to suggest what purchase orders to generate. So let me go to those two screens that you have to be aware of. The first screen would be our quantity sites screen. And the reason why this screen is important is you have to assign for the location that you are going to generate items for. You need to assign a primary vendor. And a lot of times this particular field gets ignored on the quantity site. So I wanted to point that out. If it's not there, then when you want to request items to be generated or suggested, GP won't know what vendor to buy them from. And also it looks at this field. Now the next field I can get to from right here, this planning button, or if I was to go back to my main screen here, I could use the go to and go to item resource planning. So let me just click on planning here since I already have that screen open. And in here, based on the site ID, I have indicated what the order point quantity is, the order up to level is. I've even been able to add some lead time, a safety stock level. All of these things need to be set up on the item level before we can have GP make suggestions for you. Once I have that in, I've done this for this item, and then I did it for the next item so that I'd have two in a nice range. And let me close out of here. Close out of here, just reduce this down. And go back to the purchasing menu items, and notice under transactions we have this purchase order generator. So if I click on here, now ideally if you have all your items set up, and a lot of people, that's a lot of work, maybe they only have certain items that they want to be sure that they don't miss getting orders on, so they only set up certain ones. But ideally, if you had all of your items, you could just say, I want you to take a look at all items, and based on the quantity levels and the lead time, and I'll suggest what to be ordered. Here, I'm going to make some limitations, and I'm going to say, I just want my faxes to be looked at here. Let me pick a few of them. And let's do 3. And then let's say what my purchase order date should be. I'm gonna leave it on my system date right now as 4/1, so I'm gonna leave it on that. My set promise date, I can choose the purchase order date, or I can choose the purchase order plus the vendor planning lead time. So remember, I had a lead time put up in those items, and it will take a look at that. On my promise ship date, if I want to track that, I can add days to the date that I have here. So let's just add 2 days. Let's say it's 2-day shipping. And now I'm going to click on the ship date. Now, one other thing I think I'm going to do, click on suggest purchase orders. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a site restriction as well. So let me, since I know that I had set up the resource planning for the warehouse site. Now let me click on suggest purchase orders. And so now here GP has suggested that for these 2 faxes that I had resource planning set up. Now, I had put in my restriction 3 different faxes. I did not have any resource planning set up on the 3rd item, so there were no suggestions. This first item, notice it suggested 25. I had started with 20 in the hole and an order point of order up to 5 machines, so it added that together and is suggesting 25. Now at this point I could look at this, review it, take a look at the details of it. It's picked up my vendor. It's picked up the description and the item class and all. If I wanted to accept it, I could click on generate the purchase order right now. Or I could say, well, that's great, but I actually need a few. I know that certain things are coming that GP can't know, so I'm going to up that quantity a little bit. If I know that the cost has changed, even though it's picked up the last cost for that item, I could modify the cost here before I actually generate. Now, I was going to click on generate, but based on how long the requisition generation took, I don't want to take up the time for the class just for us to watch the computer work. But basically what you would do is just generate. It would create the purchase orders for you, where you could then proceed as usual. You could edit the purchase order if at the time it hits the purchase order you realize, oh, I need to change my quantity, or I need to remove a line item or add a line item. There, you can certainly do that. It does not have to be for the same vendor for each line item. You could have different inventory items for different vendors, and it'll create multiple POs for you. All right, so there's the generate purchase orders. Here I'm getting out of it. It's saying I've got all these suggestions. Are you sure you want to? Because it's going to discard these suggestions for now. And I'm going to say yes, just to discard it so that I don't take the time to generate it. And I will cancel that. All right, so let me go back into my purchase order entry screen. I want to show you a feature that the capability has been around for a couple versions, but it's not really been highlighted a lot, and just kind of gets lost. So let me pull up a purchase order that I have here. Okay. Batch for changing. Let me I missed deleting a setup as I was looking at this. Let me get rid of the bash. Okay. There we go. All right. Let me go back to my purchase order. Oh, my computer's slow. Here we go. Sorry about that. I had left a little bit of things set up for it, so it saw that I was already partway through a process that I wanted to show you right from the start. So what I am talking about in this particular feature is prepayments. Do you ever have a situation where at the time of the purchase order, the vendor is requiring either deposit or they want a payment in full in advance, and you need to acknowledge that payment that you're going to make, and yet you still need to go through the process of the purchase order and receiving it at a later time when it comes in. This field here, the prepayment field, is available. Most of the time when you come in, you're going to see this and you're just going to completely ignore it. It looks This is just a typical purchase order. But if you need to input a prepayment, you can put in an amount that you intend to pay right away here. And if I was to drill back on this prepayment, it doesn't drill back when you put in the dollar amount. You see a prepayment. Now, based on some choices that I made in setup, I am given the option, do I want to make this a computer check or a manual payment? I'm going to leave it on computer check so you can see what that looks like. This is a setup choice. If I didn't choose that it could be a manual payment, this would be grayed out. I also have an account that I've set up saying that where it will go to, what will it debit at the time of the payment. And also it's just giving you a chance when you drill back to approve what the setup is. I'm going to say okay, and then I'm going to show you the actual payment process here a little bit. So let me close that. Let me save this PO. And then go to my batches. And just do a computer check batch. Notice when I choose computer check batch, there is a purchasing prepayment batch option since I've activated this feature. And I can check and just let it know that I'm just paying making a prepayment for a purchase order. Let me choose my checkbook ID. And just so that you can see this, I'm just going to go this far and then we'll get out. You see in our edit payment batch that the $1,500 is all set and it's coming from a purchase order. I could mark it if I was to print the edit list so that you can see what it's going to debit and credit, and then we'll get out of this. Okay. All right, so if we take a look at this report, notice we are crediting cash and debiting that vendor advance account, which is what we wanted it to do. So that was our way. I could have made a manual payment instead, but I chose to do a computer check payment. So I've taken care of that. Now in order to save time for this demo, I don't want to move it to a receipt and everything, but I do want to show you a little bit of what it looks like in the receipt process. So I did a very similar transaction and went ahead and did the payment, moved it to a receipt so that you can see what that looks like on the receipt side and what happens on the posting. So if I take a look at, let's see if I can find my, here we go. For this, just for ease of demo, I made this a shipment invoice, so it covers everything. And this was my transaction that I have. Notice I've got my $1,500 prepayment that it already acknowledges. So the amount that's due is $5,000 that's remaining on this transaction. If I click on my distributions, you'll see that because this is a shipment invoice, it doesn't need to go to an accrued purchases account. We've got our full amount going to inventory, offset by $5,000. That is still a payable, so it's going to my payables account. And then that $1,500 is going to wash out or credit the 1265 account. So that's how the prepayment works and how it flows through. All right. Oh, I should have stayed in that receiving transaction window. I wanted to show you one last feature that's a little difficult sometimes to explain, and hopefully I can touch on it well. Let me get to a receipt here. Now, what I have done, this next feature is landed cost, and I have done some setups in inventory, on the inventory side, and a little bit on the purchase order side, but most of the setup for landed cost is in inventory. Now, if you're not familiar with the idea of landed cost, it's most frequently used for people who need to purchase or are purchasing products from outside of the United States, whether it's overseas or Mexico or Canada, where when you purchase these items, you have additional expenses like the freight, the insurance, the duty on it, the taxes, special taxes that you have, and all of those things affect the items. You may have a product that you buy from a vendor, and the product, so like for example, on this particular instance, this Bell 100 costs $1.50, but is that the true cost? If I purchased it from overseas and I had all sorts of tariffs and things added to it, when you get down to it, that $1.50 item actually cost you $5.50 each. And you want GP to be able to reflect that so that when you do the sale and you sell it for $15, the offsetting cost is not $1.50, but the true cost of $5.50. That includes all of that, those landed cost items. So what I have done here just on this little demo is I have set up a few landed costs and landed cost schedules, and I assigned them to these 3 items here that I have on this particular receipt. And you'll see that I have the links here. This receipt, I think initially I started from a requisition, so I could drill back and see the requisition, but that's not important in this particular instance. What I want to show you is how landed cost works. You'll notice grayed out here, I have a landed cost dollar amount that I cannot manipulate or change here. It's just telling me what the landed cost total is. What I can do is if I look at each individual item, let me look at this bigger item. There's 50 of them at $100 each. If I drill back on this item, based on my setup, I can see that I have duty being charged at 20% the cost. I have freight and I have insurance that are flat dollar amounts. See, I've been able to use flat amount, or percent of extended cost, and that has been added to it. And GP has calculated that amount, added the landed cost from each one of these 3 items, and it added up to the $1205.50. Now I can also add landed cost on the fly. You can see this landed cost button that most of the time you ignore because you don't have it. But say I needed to add, in addition to those, I need to add an item. I'm going to add U.S. freight, air freight. And it's a flat amount. I'm going to accept that. And I'm asking it to apportion it by the value of each item. I could apportion it by the quantity of each item or the weight, but most often people will apportion it by the value. So if I click on apply that, you can see my landed cost totaled up and it's higher. Let me see, I've got a message here. All right, I need to move a little faster. All right, so my landed cost increased, and I can look at each individual item. Let me go to my $100 one, and then I'll be done with this. You can see that it apportioned out that landed cost that I added on the fly based on the value. Here's 195, since that was the big expense. Most of it went to this. And so there are ways to receive it. I can't go into the details, but there's ways now, once you invoice it, where you'll be sure to invoice Metro Bus for the items, but then you also have the opportunity to invoice those vendors that are charging you for the duty or the freight. And also, if you have questions on that, please feel free to follow up with that. That's a little more complicated in tracking all the way through and following that setup. So let me quickly move into inventory. Let's go to just a simple thing that I wanted to show, not do anything with it, but just to be sure you're aware of it. An important report that was added a few versions ago, but kind of is hidden, is if we go into inventory and activity, if you're not aware of it, please be aware that there is a historical inventory trial balance report. And it acts much like the accounts payable and the accounts receivable historical trial balances, where you can produce this report based on the GL date or the document date. You can restrict it by site. You have ranges by item numbers and dates and all sorts of things. But this is actually a more reliable report than just about any of the other inventory reports, than the stock status reports. And also, so if you haven't been using it, please take a look at it. And if you have any problems getting it, let us know. Okay. Another quick item: if you use barcodes, and the barcodes on your inventory items are based on a vendor number or a manufacturer number and not your Great Plains number, you may wish that you had a way to have that number somewhere in GP so that you can create a smart list report or some sort of custom report where you can cross-reference your GP numbers to your barcode vendor numbers or manufacturer numbers. And there actually is, kind of hidden in our items. If you go to your purchasing screen, notice there's this little gearbox. And this little gearbox icon is a place where we can put in our manufacturer number, manufacturer item, and description. Now, I believe I had set up as an example of my very first item. If you click on that, I had put in a manufacturer information. Now, like I said, you would have to customize a smart list to get this information on there, but once it's in here, it does become available for those custom reports and cross-reference. Okay, let's see. The next item, there's not a lot in inventory. The next item is kind of inventory, it's kind of sales. So it's a good transition into my sales module. If you click on sales and go to your cards menu, you'll notice there's this customer items card. You know, when you do purchase orders you're very aware of the fact that you can choose your items based on your Great Plains item number, or you could set up the purchase order to look at or input the item numbers based on your vendor item number. But on the sales side, you don't have quite that flexibility. What if your customer has their item numbers and wishes your invoices used their item numbers instead of your item numbers? Well, this allows you to do that in some respect. So let me just show you a little bit here on this customer item. I'm going to show you one customer item number that I set up. And I'm going to use good old Aaron Fitz. And the very first item, or no, it was the green phone, I believe I set up. So let me choose my phone. And here I input here information for the customer item number, their description, and short name and all. There's more fields that I could put in here, but I just put in the basics. So how does this work? If I go into a sales transaction entry and I pull up an order. Let me choose my order where I have this phone. Okay, so you can see on our sales order processing, it shows item number. It doesn't show customer item number, and there is no view or option in here where I can change it to customer item number. So why would the customer item number be useful? Now, I do have the option, if I use the lookup on this particular item, I can, on my lookup, use my choice here and say I want to see customer items, and I can add on my additional sort customer item number so that I can make sure that I've chosen the right number if what I have in front of me is just the customer item number. And what is also nice about these, even though when I choose this item on my sales order, it's going to display the Great Plains number, not the custom item number, I can modify the invoice, the order, the quote to use the customer item number. So, so that is possible, even though what I'm seeing on the screen is just the GP number. All right, so let me, while I'm in this screen, I want to print a picking ticket for you to point out another feature that is available. Now, this particular item is only available here. Notice when I choose the picking ticket, I've got this option to print picking instructions. So I want on the warehouse to have specific instructions on how to, on what they would need for picking this particular these particular phones. Now, I'll point out that this particular feature is only available for those that have the advanced distribution module. And my template, here it came up on the other screen. Let me bring that in. You can see my picking ticket looks normal here as I scroll down. These are unique instructions that I set up. So that can be available. Now, the basic setup of the picking ticket instructions is done right here under cards, picking instructions. You can create your own instruction ID. I only have one here, my color. And then I can use the go-to button to give specifics. Who gets, for what items get this instruction, or for what warehouse site, or whatever. I'm just not going to take the time to drill down and show you all of the different restrictions you can place on it and then assign to your item so that these instructions will automatically appear whenever you print a picking ticket for the items that have that instruction assigned. Okay, there's one thing that I'm going to show, and hopefully, well, hopefully it's obvious that everybody knows about this. It's been available for a long time, but it's amazing how many times I notice that people don't know about it and have not taken advantage of it. You notice when I come into this sales transaction screen, it defaults to quote, and that is what it always does. That's what GP has set it up to default to quote. A lot of people don't do quotes. They start at orders, or maybe they just start at invoices, but they always have to change this type ID from quote to order. Now, this is a user preference setting, so if you haven't changed this and weren't aware of this change, if you make the change for yourself, it doesn't mean that the next person gets this change. So you would have to point it out to fellow users. If I go to Microsoft Dynamics GP and go to User Preferences, and I'm saying I don't want it to start with quote, I want it to start with order, and say okay. And now when I click on my sales transaction entry screen, it will start with order. So like I said, that feature's been around for a while, but a lot of people forget about it. So please take advantage of that. One of the items I wanted to show you quickly is a repeating order. So let me scroll up. I've got a repeating order set up in here. Now, where these might be useful is if you have a product that you need to invoice over and over and over again. It never changes, the price stays the same, the items that you're ordering are the same, and and in the past you've re-entered it every time you have to do the billing. Well, we have this option of creating a repeating order. If I drill back on the document number, I can show you some setup that is required for it to become a repeating order. There's a repeating box that by default is unchecked. You can check that. By default, the times to repeat is 0, which means it would repeat indefinitely until you stopped it. For this example, I said I want it to repeat 12 times. I indicated the frequency that I want it to repeat. And then it gives me the option to say, okay, when I bill this, or when I create the invoice, do I want the invoice to stay in the batch? If I left the batch ID blank, it would stay within my existing batch. So my existing batch is right now is repeating. If I left it blank, the invoice would go into the repeating batch. But instead, I indicated that I want my invoices, when it's created from this order, I want it to go into its own unique batch ID. Now, this information that's grayed out just tells us some basics about it. It tells me that I've already run this particular order, and it's repeated 3 times. So I ran this on January, February, and March, and now it's ready to transfer to invoice in April. And as I run that, it will update and track this information for me. So basically, all I need to do, I'll quickly transfer this repeating order for you. Transfer that to invoice. I'm going to cancel the log. You'll see it created an invoice dated 8/1. It put it in my repeating invoice batch, and my invoice is all set. That's great. Now let me save this and go back to my repeating order so you can see what happened, that the order did not go away. Go back to it. And it was repeating order 1001. Notice here, it's still here for me to use again. The date has been updated to next month. If I look back on my information about this particular order, it now tells me it's repeated 4 times, when the last time it was that I ran it. And also, if you have anything like that, we have a number of clients that take advantage of this particular option. Let's see. I'm going to skip by a couple things. Well, let me mention one thing here in sales, and then I want to tell you about some tools that are also available. There are, if you have the advanced distribution module, there are times where you need more than a quote and an order and an invoice. You need to know in the order stage, has it been picked yet? Has it been approved? Has it been confirmed? hasn't been packed yet, hasn't been shipped, and you don't want to go right from order to invoice until you've confirmed all of those steps have been done. Well, with advanced distribution, there is some setup here. You notice that we have advanced picking setup. If I click on that, that's not the right one. Where is my, I'm sorry, it was fulfillment workflow setup, where I can set up, you notice these are editable fields. I have 6 different statuses where I can move my orders through. And here in this Fabricam company, they have used these as examples of your 6 different statuses. So this is the basic setup. Let me show you a fulfillment order and where those statuses show up and how you can move them through. I won't have time to go into great detail, but I want you to know that they are available. So let me just pick one here. They're also available on SmartList. So you notice here that this fulfillment order looks like a regular order. Down here I have a document status that tells me it's ready to print the picking ticket. So that is the step or the stage that it's at in the fulfillment process. I have a few others. As you look at this document status, as I flip through them, you'll see that some of them are in different stages. And I have, let me show you quickly a SmartList report where that may make more sense. Okay, come on. There we go. Transaction, fulfillment orders. So now I can see all my fulfillment orders and the statuses that they are at. As I said, I won't go through the actual process of how I move them from one status to the other. I'll just show you the screen quite quickly here. If we go to our order fulfillment screen, this was under sales transactions, and I choose my fulfillment order, I have options here along the top where I can fulfill all, I can confirm, or I could print. So for example, if the step that is needed is to print the picking ticket or to print the packing slip, I can actually print it from this screen. I can, if I'm the person that would confirm that it's okay, I can come on here and confirm this, and then it would move on to the next step. And at the last step is once it's shipped, it will actually create the invoice for you. And also the fulfillment gives you, the fulfillment process, which is in the advanced distribution module, gives you extra steps that you can do within sales order processing. All right, so just very quickly, I want to touch on some of the tools that are available. I'm going to go to my home screen and bring up the Professional Services Tools library. I'll touch on the inventory tools first because they're the ones that I think are the easiest or the most obvious to understand. We've got the site combiner, the site modifier, the description modifier, the item number combiner, and item number modifier. So they are just like what they describe. If you have a couple of sites or some numbers that you realize you don't need 2 of them anymore, they can be combined into one, but you don't want to lose that history. You can select these to combine items or sites into one, and the history gets merged, it's brought in together. You can do them for one item number at a time, or you can do a whole range of items if you realize you have to kind of make a mass change to what your item number looks like. You can use the modifier to change your numbers, or to combine your numbers to make one. That's usually done one at a time, the combiner, but the modifier, where you just plain need to change what those numbers are or those site names are, you can do that one at a time or in mass. So those are great tools. Purchase order cost defaulter. You know that typically if I was to click, if I just check on this gives me the option, if I click on next, typically your purchase order cost comes from your current cost, or you may have set up to just pick up the last cost. Well, if you would prefer for it to be the standard cost, this tool gives you that option. If I mark this, and from now on, it's not a, these items have used standard cost, these items use current cost. It's kind of an all or nothing. But if you would prefer to use the standard cost, you need to use this tool. So that's the purchase order cost. The customer, let me come up here. I'm sorry, I'm jumping really quickly. Our SOP, customer item lookup. What this does, and I don't have time to drill back, but what this does is when you're in the sales transaction entry screen, or you drill back on the detail of an item in that sales transaction entry screen, there is a feature that you can go up into your ribbon and find historical information on what that customer has typically purchased and what they paid for their items. So as you're entering items and you just want to see their ordering history, this will allow you to do that. It's really great. Another feature here, this SOP purchase order number, if you have requirements to have a purchase order on your sales order, and it's so easy to do a typo, or if you're importing those and you accidentally use a purchase order number that's been used before, and that's important. GP will let you use repeated customer purchase order numbers, but maybe you don't want to be able to do that. This will allow you to set up, let's take a look at this a little bit and click on next, just real quick. You can set up validations for the customer purchase order on the quote or the order or the invoice. If you're looking at these things, do you want it to do nothing if you put in a duplicate purchase order number? Do you want it to warn you that it's a duplicate purchase number? Do you want it to warn you and ask you if you want to proceed, or just to automatically reject it, or give you an option to put in a password to override and go ahead and use that duplicate purchase order number? So that could be useful for people who have problems with the customer purchase order number. The last tool that I want to point out, because to me this is really important, is default add item in purchase order processing and sales order processing. Have you ever had the situation where, say you have, I'm just going to use an example of a test as your item number, but somebody typed it with TESTS. They just got going on with their fingers and they typed it wrong, and yet when they tapped off the field, GP accepted it and it kept on going, not realizing that GP was accepting it as a non-inventoried item. So it will not be tracked. It will not be followed, and it's the wrong item. And what this does is it adds a default warning saying, do you want to add this item? Basically giving them a heads up that they put in a non-inventoried item. And do they want to add that item, or do they just want to continue as a non-inventoried item? Without this checkbox, it won't warn you. It'll just let you keep going. All right. So buzzed through that. I skipped over one feature that I wanted to talk a little bit about, although it's not a new feature. The SOP to POP links and integration. If you were curious or want to know more about that, I'd be happy to help or discuss it with you individually at another time. Do we have any questions? So let me expand my menu to see if anyone has typed in a chat or Kara, you were quiet. Kara's on the phone with me, kind of monitoring if there's any questions. Is there anything come up?
No, I think you covered quite a bit of it. I think you did a great job.
All right, we still have people on. You have a few minutes here. If you want to buzz in, please let me know. Okay. Well, I will tell you, while you're thinking about that, I'll just tell you we have been recording this session, so it will be available to you or any of your coworkers if you would like to review it, either a little slower. If you do have any follow-ups, if there was any ideas that we triggered, you just got a sketch of it, but not the details and want more details, feel free to reach out to our team and we'll be certainly willing to help. Otherwise, I think we're good unless anyone pipes in. All right. Well, thank you very much for your attendance, and I appreciate your. You know, I know it's hard to cut out time in your day to do this, so I appreciate it. Feel free to follow up afterwards if you would like to. But have a good day, and look forward to hearing from you or talking to you again about maybe another Head and Gems class somewhere down the line. I think Kara's got one, and I've got one more. Belinda's got some. I'm just thrilled of how many people are attending these classes, and have a good day, good week. Thank you.